Before we begin, thank you very much to Panda T01 for joining the Patreon campaign. That's a familiar name. Welcome back. Thank you very much to everyone who is supporting on the Patreon right now. It's become very, very important, more so than it did before. I have a new computer to pay off. So I do thank everyone for that, that is helping with that, as well as many other things behind the scenes I'm hoping to get to show you soon. It's been a long time coming. But that's for later. For now, we're staring at the Prime Wars Trilogy image, because I had a Patreon request. One of my regulars actually skipped this trilogy and is kind of wondering what they missed out on and how it was back when it first came out. So I am here to oblige. Now, a lot of you, this is going to be old news because this is not terribly old. A lot of you were here for that. But for those who might have missed out on an interesting trilogy of toys, we can discuss it now that we've gone through the majority of it on the top 10s of the year. So we are starting off, of course, where this trilogy started off with, and that is Combiner Wars. Now, when we first got the heads up that we're going to get new teams of combiners, we in the fandom kind of lost our minds because this is something we assumed Hasbro wasn't doing. Now, there's a lot of reasons why this is risky for Hasbro to do, which we'll get into here in a bit. But we were always told it was something they weren't looking at, and it's one reason why combiners are so prevalent in third-party. Because it's one of the first things Hasbro said, we're not doing this, and third-party companies just jumped on it and went, ooh, we're going to do all of them. But the day came. We had a full series of combiners, and basically the entire toy line was in on the whole combining toy thing. So everything kind of played in the same play pattern. Literally almost everything was a combiner. And of course, this did let us have a lot of characters that we hadn't had in a long time. They turned out pretty good for the most part. Sometimes not so much. But the point being, it was the return of a ton of different characters that we didn't really expect to get back, according to Hasbro. It was exciting at the time. Now, the line did kind of suffer from a few flaws, and that does come from the whole combination gimmick in the first place. Everything kind of started being a little bit samey in the toy line, because all of the toys had to be about the same size, because all of them had to form a leg that was a uniform height. All of them had to form an arm where the shoulder was in the right spot and the elbow was in the right spot, all to make sure every combiner possibility was evenly balanced. Which does mean a lot of the toys started feeling very samey, you know. So a lot of the deluxes especially, it becomes a very repetitive line. Now, the line had some interesting ideas. For instance, the Legends class toys were still going at the time, so rather than do something on their own, they decide, let's incorporate them into these gimmicks. Blackjack here is based on a G1 Micromaster, but it's also based on the card that made up Menassor's chest armor in the original G1 toy. So splitting the difference and making it a completely new character. And this would go on for most of the combiners. They would either have someone like a Legends class Shockwave for Bruticus, Power Glide for the aerial bots who formed weapons, or they would have someone like this who formed a component of the torso armor. Interesting idea to kind of get the smaller toys into the line. It also means that for a brief moment, combiner teams had 6 members rather than the traditional 5. That also meant one of the big things that kept Hasbro from releasing combiners is the fact that so many of the teams are very, very similar to each other. You know, aerial bots are mostly white and red jets, so that if those are all proliferating the toy shelves, that's going to eat into themselves. That's going to hurt sales because, you know, the toys look too much alike, kids aren't going to be interested in more than one, etc. So they decided we need a little bit more variety in here. So most of the classic combiners got a brand new member. For the aerial bots, for instance, it was Alpha Bravo. So the aerial bots now had a helicopter to add a little bit of vehicular variety to the combiner team, and thus variety on the toy shelves. Protectobots got the ever-popular Rook, a SWAT truck. We got, who else did we get? We got Off-Road, a truck for the Stunticons. Things like that. Most of the teams had some replacement, with the exception of the Combaticons, who did get a blast-off, but a jet. Because, even though the Combaticons had the variety, there was concern about the scaling. They did some weird choices with scaling in this toy line. So, for instance, they didn't want a shuttle that was the same size as a car, so instead we got a jet, because, that makes so much more sense. But they also did the same thing with Groove for the Protectobots. He had to be the torso armor for Defensor. Instead, we got Rook, and later on, they had to amend this. Eventually, we did get a proper Blastoff who does transform into a shuttlecraft, and we got a proper Groove that turns into a gigantic motorcycle, so they at least amended that mistake. The toy line would manage to get out most of the classic Combiner teams, as well as a few outliers. We got a Lio Kaiser, oddly enough, with a retool of a Skylynx toy. Weird. Just enough to fill a slot, and I would go for things like the Technobots. Sorry, it's been a long day. Where the Technobots mostly had retools, and that's something where the line starts to get a little bit more samey. About halfway through the line, they started producing new versions of 84 cast members, and sometimes they'll beyond 84, into Combiners for the first time. So we got Prowl with a flat chest. Now he can become an arm or a leg. And then, of course, Optimus Prime, who was an early wave figure because he's a pre-tool for Motormaster. You had to do this because the downside to Combiners, and the downside of making an entire line devoted to Combiners, is no Combiner character is a major character in fiction. There's some standouts like Swindle, but not household names. When you're talking about the retailers, they want the household names they recognize. They want to see Optimus Prime and Starscream and Megatron in the assortments that they're buying. So you had to get Prime in there somewhere. So, yeah, Optimus Prime's a Combiner torso now. Weird enough. So is Skylynx. I just wanted to show you that toy because, yeah, that wasn't a fever dream. That actually happened. Combiner Wars is also where we got a new fan-voted bot, which ended up being Victorion. We got to choose molds, we got to choose gender, we got to choose color scheme, and then less important things like place of origin. That stuff is not as interesting, but this wasn't bad, and it did allow us to have aside from a very Christmassy Combiner, it allowed us to have a Combiner that, for a very rare time, had a unified color scheme. You'll also note hands and feet that no one else came with at the time. Everyone else had the hand-foot guns so that could act as ridiculous-shaped blaster, or hand, or foot. Clever. Weird, but clever. The line also included the return of the Constructicons. We talked about those. These are very topical right now, and a lot of people are kind of going back and looking at how this one does have a lot of flaws. We admit that. I still think it is a really fun set of toys. I think it serves its purpose well. I think it's one of the better toys we got out of Combiner Wars, as you will note by my countdown for that year. That said, there is a little bit of a weird spot with Combiner Wars. You see where everything kind of played in the Combiner sandbox, except for leader class toys. The leaders were exempt from this. We got Megatron from both G1 and Armada. We got Seekers retooled from the previous Jetfire mold. And we got one of my favorite Ultra Magnus toys ever, though mistransformed here to make his arms look awful. Point being, it was odd that we had all these characters that worked within the Combiner teams, but then we just had random leader class toys that didn't seem to play along. Weird. Very weird. But you know what? How else are you going to use a leader in this kind of play pattern? So that's Combiner Wars, and like I said, it's a good toy line until about halfway through. After that, most of the molds end up being repaints or retools of each other, and when you're doing so many repaints or retools of toys that already feel very similar because of the engineering limitations, you get a toy line that grows very tiring. So I think we got really excited when it kicked off, and then by the time it was close to being done, I think we were all just exhausted. Fortunately, Titan's return was a breath of fresh air. Right off the heels of getting a gimmick that Hasbro said we're not touching again, we got Headmasters, which is another gimmick Hasbro said they weren't going to touch again. And the Headmasters are now Titan Masters, which means they've added extra playability to the mix. This gave us a chance to get all of the classic Headmasters again, outside of, the occasional, smaller one that ended up being, Headmaster Juniors in Japan. Those missed the boat, unfortunately, but most of the big ones, most of the major Headmaster characters did get done. We would get a Fortress Maximus, we would get a Triptychon, we got all these kinds of crazy things. But point being, Headmasters were all covered, and then the reason why Hasbro never wanted to do Headmasters again is because of how easy it is to lose the head. If you lose the head, you're out the whole toy. So they also came up with an idea that Japan hit on when Headmasters were first a thing over there, and that is a small-scale toy to produce spare heads. Now, they're all interchangeable, so you can mix and match bodies however you want. Customizers loved this line for these reasons. But it did lead to some very weird inclusions, like Nightbeat is just a head, and to date, this is still the most recent Nightbeat toy we have. That's sad. It also gave them a chance to incorporate a lot of Japanese exclusive characters that were Headmasters over there. Sawback here, for instance. It's a cool idea. Gets them out into the Western fiction, gives us brand new toys of really obscure characters, and yes, if you lose a head, there are replacements available at the store for a nominal $4.99 price, and then they come with a little vehicle that they can ride in that transforms into something else, transforms into weapons for the larger toys. Not a bad idea for the tiny play pattern. Legends class toys followed suit. Rather than being tied to groups now, they just kind of played along with the gimmick. They formed vehicles that Titan Masters could ride inside, which is not a bad way of incorporating things, and they ended up being nice, solid little Legends class figures of some of our favorites. Leaders finally got into it as well. They had this fun little trick where the larger toys had different ways of compensating for the head. So Voyagers had little extra elements around their head to make them look a little bit bigger. Leader class toys had whole helmets that fit over their Titan Masters. The Titan Masters with Leaders also tended to have larger faces to compensate for the size. But that did mean that, again, every toy worked with the Titan Masters, and all the Titan Masters were a uniform scale so everything could play along with everything. It gave you so much play value. Absolutely loved it. Now, as long as they were doing all the Headmasters, Hasbro and Takara decided, let's just do a whole bunch of characters from that era, so Titan Masters also included former Target Masters. Yes, I know, everyone loved Trigger Happy. I was told a million times, where's Trigger Happy on your list of the best toys? It is a good toy, I just don't think it's as great as a lot of people are hyping up. I liked other toys better. That's just an opinion thing. Calm down. Still a good toy. Still weird to see Target Masters with Headmaster gimmicks, however, though they do play into it well, even the ones that are based on 86 characters. We got Hot Rod, Cup, we got, blanking now. We got Scourge, we got Blur. We got a bunch of classic characters again, and now they were all doing the Headmaster thing, but they were made for pretty decent toys too. Now, the Voyagers are where things got really interesting, because it wasn't enough that Voyagers could also play with the Titan Master gimmick. All the Voyagers were triple changers. So Optimus Prime last year was a combiner torso. This year, he's a triple changer. So the first time ever Optimus Prime is a supersonic jet, or tanker jet, whichever one you want to call it. And clearly, yes, he's based off G2 Prime, because he's a pre-tool of Octane. So he's going to have a little bit of that element thrown in. It's a fun idea. And again, tons of play value. It was really cool to know that every Voyager that came out was going to be a triple changer, because that already gave you so much more to play with. It let you get all the classic triple changers out as well. My boy made it. Keep in mind, Thrilling 30 did Springer and Sandstorm, so all of my others were kind of left in the dust. Blitzwing did come out, but it was not a great toy. This made up for it. This was a really good one, especially if you could get the Japanese version with the better colors and a little extra weaponry on the side. Beyond that, we got Octane, we got Astro Train, we got Broadside, but we don't talk about him. So it was a great chance to actually complete the triple changers. Oddly enough, the only ones they skipped out on were the ones that already had this gimmick, the horror cons from G1. We had to wait until Siege to start getting Ape Face and Snapdragon. But hey, everyone else in this line was happy to ape their triple changing headmaster thing at the time. And even the Titans. You had Fortress Maximus, who himself was a double headmaster, so yeah, he actually had the Titan Master thing too. But even Trypticon had a gimmick where he could swallow Titan Masters, so that led to a lot of weird toys and a lot of weird scenes of heads being stuffed in his gut. It's a fun toy line. Titan's Return is a blast, and I love how much interplay it has between all the size classes. Literally everything was included. And everything did special stuff. Leaders had base modes, or they were like 6 changers, crazy stuff. It also led to us getting the Monster Bots. Those made a return thanks to the Titan's Return toy line. Took a while to get them all out, but eventually they were there, and I appreciate that because they're such obscurities. I never thought I would get another Grotesque. But here he is, and he's down on my shelves right now. So, you already had a good toy line that petered out and got stale in Combiner Wars, but the second part of the trilogy nailed it. Titan's Return was a fantastic toy line that managed to stay fresh its entire way through. And that just kind of had us excited. Well, if the first one was good and the second one was great, then surely the third part of the trilogy would be fantastic. And that was Power of the Primes, and that toy line was kind of a mess. It was a shorter run line, and the idea behind it was essentially to intermix things from Combiner Wars and Titan's Return, while also filling in gaps of the two. So we started getting a lot of oddball characters like Blackwing or Darkwing, Don't Call Me Duck. Those got new toys. Jazz got a new toy, we don't talk about him. We also got the first toys to represent the female Autobots from the Search for Alpha Trion. They all had to be the same mold, which I'm still angry about, but at least they got something, finally. And the Voyagers were back to doing the same thing too. We got an Alita 1 for the first time in forever. I mean, she's IDW based, she's a jet, and she's like bulked out because she's going to be Starscream someday, but still, we had an Alita 1. So we could actually have all female combiners. Good luck getting Green Light and good luck getting a Lancer and Signal and a Green Light. Yeah, that's not pretty on the aftermarket. Legends class toys kind of did their own thing a little bit. They kind of went back to having a new member for the combiners. But they still had Titan Master incorporation. Titan Masters could ride on them. So, you had a little bit of both going on. But then again, you also had a repaint of the Shrapnel released in Thrilling 30, just kind of filling up the line. And then you had Battle Trap, who I wish I could put on the list of best toys of the year, but he's technically 2 toys sold individually, never sold as a 2-pack, so I can't include him. This is a brilliant figure. This is an absolutely brilliant figure. I love how they expanded the Duocon thing to be a two-part combiner. Absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. But again, it's just the Legends class kind of doing its own thing this year. Now, for the smallest size, they didn't do replacement Titan Masters anymore, but they did something similar with a new twist. They did Prime Masters. The difference is they all represented one of the 13 primes, which meant these tiny little blocks were the first toys of the 13, which is really, really sad. But all of them, rather than coming with a vehicle that could transform, came with classic Pretender shells. And the Prime Masters fit inside, like classic Pretender toys. So we had a tiny little Pretender gimmick going on, and the Pretender shells could turn into these makeshift weapons for the larger toys. They were lame. They were very lame weapons. It was usually just flip out a handle and flip out the barrel. That's it. It's a cute way of incorporating Pretenders, though, and it gave the Prime Masters something to do. We'll get into the real purpose of them later on, but let's go and take a look at what the Voyagers were doing, because the Voyagers were back to being combiners as well, and of course this brought along one of the biggest ones. We got Dinobots. For the first time in forever, all 5 Dinobots were being released in the same toy line. They're a little bit rough. Grimlock is the Voyager, all the others are deluxes, so screw your scale. But the big thing about this is, yeah, after much fan demand, the Dinobots became a combiner. I like the Dinobots better when they don't combine, because I don't think they should need to combine to be cool. I think they are as powerful as they need to be individually, and I think that makes them more, I think that makes them stand out more that they don't combine. But here we had Volcanicus, and I'll be honest with you, I always hate the way this toy looks. It's gangly in the wrong ways that a Dinobot should never look. It's kind of poorly balanced. I'm not a fan. Not a fan. I apologize. Just not into it. I liked Abominus better. Abominus was great. Like, Blot is a way better toy than he has any right to be. But this was one of the other big requests from Combiner Wars. Where's Abominus? You know, they did every other did every other team. They got Computron out as a box set, along with, like, they even did like Generation 2 Combiner teams. They did all the G2 repaints that we wanted. Where was Abominus? So Power of the Primes gave us Abominus. Okay, great. Now, you will notice there's a little bit of an oddity to him in the fact that he's got what looks like one of those Prime Masters stuck in his chest. It's not. It's just a basic block. All the Voyagers had this kind of basic block to them. And this is why. The whole point of Prime Masters was they didn't just transform into logos for the Primes. They transformed into Matrix cores. Certain figures in this toy line came with a Matrix of leadership, where you could pop the core out and stick in any one of the 13 primes. This is fictionally supposed to empower the Transformer with various abilities of the primes. There were collector cards that featured like certain combinations of these characters, and it was random which one you got. It's all ridiculous. It's all ridiculous. And frankly, after you got through with like the return of Headmasters and the return of Combiners, interchangeable matrices just was not interesting. It wasn't. And it led to weird characters getting matrices, like Predaking. Predaking has a matrix of leadership because the toy line demanded it. Now, for this year, we actually got to vote on a character who would be released in this line and who would become a new matrix bearer. And we had a lot of choices. They range, a lot of familiar characters in there. RC was in the voting. Star Saber was in the vote. I believe even Deathsaurus was in there. The winner, however, was Optimus Primal. And rather than just do a normal Optimus Primal toy, they went with Optimal Optimus. A really stupid Optimal Optimus with no tank mode, and an incredibly weird take on the original Primal, who kind of turns into a surfboard bus thing. I've never liked this toy. I will admit, makes sense for him to hold a Matrix, but I never liked this toy. I just never did. I liked it better when they repainted it. The throne of the primes, where like he's like fully ascended into being a new age prime. I think the toy looks way better in his original season 1 colors. I just do. I think this is a lot nicer looking. He comes with a cardboard throne. He comes with a wand that can hold prime masters and potentially get them stuck. But the big thing is that he comes with a wheel. Like there's a plastic tray behind the throne that you can spin. And what sucks about this is this was a special release item. Special price point, no less. And if you wanted to get all 13 primes, you had to get this version of Primal. Because this is the only one that actually came with all of them, including the unknown 13th prime. It's really kind of scummy. You had to spend a lot of money. Like, between this and Predaking, like, you had to spend a lot of money just to try to get every single prime. And, of course, they're just little Matrix cores, so it's lame. It's lame. Now, it did produce the evolution gimmick. I will give it that. Optimus Prime and Rodimus Prime are both very fun toys with a lot of play value. Some of my favorites they did. And that's the shining spot of the whole Power of the Primes toy line. They got very sporadic, really good toys out there. Predaking's really good. Prime and Rodimus are really good. Abominus is really good. But it really seems to only be in those top tier ones. The repetition of the female mold, the Dinobots being kind of sloppy put together, the disorganization and just kind of like half-hearted attempt at the Matrix gimmick. There's good toys here, but it's muddled in a whole lot of filler, and it's muddled in a whole lot of, well, why didn't you do this sooner? So it's a kind of a whimper to go out on for the Prime War trilogy, even though there are some really standout things. And that is a 3 to 4 year span of Transformer toys that if you weren't there at the time, now you have a full education on. Took a little bit longer than I thought, but of course, there's a lot to go over. All the lines had their oddities, but it very much feels like the way movies work, where like the first one is good, the second one is really good, and then the third one no one wanted. There's a lot of movie trilogies that kind of pair to that, and this is kind of how I felt with the Prime War trilogy. But that's just my opinion. This is me just giving you a little bit of historical and a little bit of opinionated information. Let me know in the comments below what your favorite part was. No disrespect to anyone who liked Power of the Primes. I think it's problematic, but I know there's still people out there who enjoy it, so, you do you. We're all just here to enjoy it. But for now, thank you everyone for watching. I will see you next time.